Yo, what's good with you? Back in black with another Enlisted video. If you guys are new to the channel and you love shooting games just like me, make sure you aim for that like button and shoot that subscribe button as well. It'll help you find better teammates and improve skill-based matchmaking. At least I hope so. In this video, we're going to be comparing both BR3 light machine guns for the Western Axis forces and Enlisted to see which of them is the best for you in your particular playstyle and overall, of course. Coming up first, we're going to be taking a look at the slightly less iconic but still very popular predecessor to the MG42, the MG34. And as the description notes, this weapon was the first variant used by Germany in a new generation of light machine guns known for being general purpose or adaptable to many roles, whether that be offensive with a bipod, defensive with a tripod, i.e. the light machine gun nest for this faction, or even usable on a bunch of vehicles, which you can find them on a plethora of them for the German faction. That said, you should pay this gun great respect historically, as it set the blueprint for almost all general purpose light machine guns going forward in the future. Getting into the stats, for the maximum damage we're looking at 12 flat, and out to 100 meters that'll drop down to 10.8, which is not only par for the course when it comes to machine guns in the game of Enlisted, that is also tied for first in the tier between both competitors, so they are equally as deadly and above the killing threshold if you can land any singular bullet or two at the most. Getting those two bullets over to your target should be a pretty instant gratification feeling, as we are getting a bullet velocity of 750 meters per second, which is also tied for first in the tier across both competitors. Something I did want to point out about the bullet velocity, since one isn't necessarily better than the other, is that while 750 isn't necessarily a bad stat for leading horizontal targets, it still does require a bit of predictive shooting starting at about 50 to 60 meters, and I say that because typically when you shoot somebody with a machine gun and they realize what you're wielding, they'll typically try to break line of sight laterally, so it's something that you want to look out for and or get used to so as to not waste a bunch of ammo, which machine guns are, also prone to do. To elaborate on the shot leading a little bit more, another thing that's going to affect how much you need to lead a target in general is going to be the rate of fire. This is because lower rate of fire weapons in general have more space and time in between each shot, so that's more room for your burst of bullets to miss a medium or long range target that is moving horizontally. As it pertains to the MG34 in particular, this won't be as much of an issue since we're getting a best in tier rate of fire at 800 rounds per minute, which means the bullets are more closely grouped together one after another and thus harder to avoid even when moving laterally as a result. Of course, provided you have decent enough aim. In terms of the reload time, this is one of the parts where the MG34 will hold you up a lot more than the competition, coming in at a tier worst 5.7 seconds, which can and will get you killed very often if you are caught out in the open reloading. To throw salt in the wound, this is one of those times where alternate reloading makes absolutely no difference in the time required, so you basically either gotta just thug it out reloading in the open, hoping for the best, be a little more tactful where you reload and try and be behind cover whenever that situation arises, or at least staying mobile and trying to avoid incoming fire. It's a good thing we're shooting so rapidly, because more than likely some of those bullets are just going to miss by default when we have a shot deviation as detrimental as 47, which hopefully you can tell by my tone that is first in the tier. In the grand scheme, basically what that means is that in order to combat this disadvantage, you'll want to try your best to shoot in small quick bursts, which basically gives your spread cone some actual time to reset. This only applies when you're not in danger from a close range target though. So do take this advice and apply it to the correct situation, as it is a general purpose light machine gun after all. Getting into the recoil, our control percentage is coming out to a typical 10%, which is tied for best, or I guess I should say worst in the tier, since it is standard, and that also means we'll have to do most of the recoil controlling ourselves. The vertical stat is clocking in at 15, which is best in the tier by a long shot, pun intended. Meanwhile, the horizontal recoil is coming out to 19, which is going to be worse in the tier, and essentially lets you know where that zigzag bullet pattern is coming from the longer you hold down the trigger. As with any machine gun, you can mitigate a lot of that by going prone, mounting, or upgrading your weapon over time, and choosing perks wisely. Something you'll definitely want to be keenly aware of with the MG34 is that it holds the best in tier slot for magazine capacity at 50 bullets per reload, so that basically gives you more killing potential to engage multiple squads per soldier, and gives you more margin for error to correct your aim if you miss, on top of, basically having more time to actually enjoy the fire rate of the weapon. So that's a lot of bonuses to consider, and generally speaking, I'd say having more bullets allows you to really lean into what it means to be a machine gunner, in my humble opinion. To the point of being a machine gunner, one of the biggest downsides of the MG34 is going to be the weight of the weapon, which comes in at a whopping 13.6 kilograms and a sprint factor of 50%, which is heaviest and slowest in the tier, so this is obviously the more defensive oriented weapon that will have you slugging around the map. Of course, I always say you can easily circumvent this by just taking out your melee weapon when on the move for extended periods of time, or when crossing vast distances with no apparent danger. Maybe you're just getting back into the fight from a base spawn, so no reason to nuke your stamina like that when your team more than likely needs your help ASAP, especially on defense. As a cool fact that I didn't mention yet, the MG34 was so general purpose that it came with a semi-auto function as well, so you could technically squeeze 25 to 50 kills out of one magazine at max potential, or when you enter flow state. Last thing I did want to mention, of course, is going to be the iron sights, which I find them to be pretty good. Very good, actually. The V-shaped dip in the rear guard leaves a crisp, sharp visual of the front post. The only reason that is not getting a bright green from me is going to be that the rear guard can obscure a target sometimes, especially with how wild the horizontal recoil can be when unmounted, but it is a minor complaint. Genuinely speaking, I love using this gun, if I'm being real with you. Coming up for our next and our last competitor, we now gotta take a look at the multi-faction SIG KE7 machine gun. Shout out to Switzerland for selling to both the Axis and the Allies, because not too long ago, the MG34 was the only BR3 machine gun for the Western Axis, so choices were basically non-existent, and had that continued to be the case, I wouldn't be here making this video right now, so you love to see it when more stuff is added to the tech tree. As I previously mentioned on our last gun, the damage and the bullet velocity for the KE7 is going to be identical to the MG34, but this gun behaves vastly different in comparison. For starters, when it comes to the rate of fire, the KE7 shoots at a much slower 550 rounds per minute, which does a couple of things to your gunfights. At closer range, you have much less margin for error to miss any of your shots when trying to dispatch a group of enemies, because slower shooting means more time for one of the soldiers to snap aim you in retaliation if the player does not switch fast enough to do it manually himself. A perfect time to mention that this issue is exacerbated by the magazine size being halved all the way down to 25 shots per reload. I will be fair and note that the smaller magazine is a con that is offset by a blazing fast reload speed at 2.4 seconds, which is easily best in the tier, but I've only explained half of how a slower rate of fire inconveniences you when wielding an LMG. In regard to your medium and long range fights with the KE7, the slower rate of fire means you have to be even more precise when leading your target, since the bullets are filling your shot deviation cone at a much slower rate, which means the shots still end up feeling pretty sporadic despite the lower spread at 33, which is best in the tier, but still ends up feeling like a bit of a placebo effect, if that makes any sense. Something else you're probably going to, well, not even probably, you're definitely going to hate is going to be that although we're getting the exact same recoil control percentage at 10%, our vertical stat is jumping all the way to a nasty stat of 43, which is almost 3 times that of the MG34 and easily worse than the tier as a result. Meanwhile, the horizontal stat does see a reduction, to be fair, going down to 15, which is best in the tier by 4 points, but that trade-off is questionable to say the least. To control it, most of our concentration is going to go to pulling down, but to a much larger degree than required for the MG34, clearly. The only real stats that the KE7 is going to shine in, aside from the reloading time, is going to be the speed at which you can move with said gun. And that said, we're coming in at a weight of 9 kilograms and a sprint factor of 80%, which is definitely first in the tier, and pretty rare for the machine guns in general, I will admit. But I gotta ask, does that mobility improvement justify everything else that you lost out on? The last thing I did want to mention is going to be the iron sights of the KE7, which are not horrible by any stretch of the imagination or even in comparison to the MG34, but I do find them to be not as finely sculpted as the counterpart featuring the more rectangular, blocky, or low profile iron sights, which again basically are usable, but they are not as elegant as the MG34 if I had to, basically wrap it up in a little bow. I suppose the final tidbit that I'll also mention is that to combat the small mag, you can put this gun in semi-auto mode just like the MG34 and kind of think of this gun as more of a heavy ass rifle as opposed to a light machine gun with a really small magazine. But yeah, man, with all that being said, I think it's time we transition into the conclusion. And I gotta say, with the addition of the KE7 into BR3, we now have 2 machine guns of the same damage profile but vastly different personalities, which is always fun. But personally, I think one gun is handedly beat by the other. When I look at the KE7, I see a gun that wants to fulfill that hybrid LMG assault rifle role. A lot of that opinion is attributed to the focus on the enhanced mobility and the smaller magazine with the really quick reload. Stuff like that is cool on offense when you typically have to be on a move for the majority of the match, but let's be real here for just one moment. As I've said in a few of my other videos, there are easy ways to maintain good or even decent mobility even when using a heavier gun, and that is simply by switching to your melee or your sidearm. Like I said earlier, when you are on the move, the slightly faster sprinting speed is not needed as much as the 25 extra bullets in any firefight for that matter. And if you perk your soldiers out correctly, the stamina drain begins to become basically a non-factor as you progress throughout your enlisted career. Once you consider that, and then factor in the much worse vertical recoil with a shot deviation that that doesn't really feel much better by comparison, it makes it pretty easy for me and hopefully for you to conclude that the KE7 was destined for second place or last place in the tier, while the MG34 will go home with the gold medal. But I gotta ask as well, what do you think? Put that down there in the comment section. Out of these two LMGs, which is your favorite, and tell me why? Are you more like me and you want that heavier machine gun feel? Or do you genuinely enjoy the more nimble, lightweight nature of the KE7? At the end of the day, these are just my personal opinions, but I am hoping with the combination of my gameplay and my explanations, you can decide for yourself which BR3 LMG is best for you to spend your silver on, equipping your Germans and Italians, and upgrading the weapons over and over again as well. If you enjoyed or found anything I said insightful or useful, don't forget to aim for that like button and shoot that subscribe button as well. Share it with a friend who's in Germany, BR2, or Italy BR2. Maybe they're moving to BR3 or will be soon. I hope that you do, and I hope that they find this video useful. But yeah, man, other than that, I do appreciate you guys for watching, and I hope you guys have a lovely rest of your day. Black guy out.